Holy cow, this is fun music, and I'm excited to share it with you. Welcome to Top Score from Classical Minnesota Public Radio. I'm Emily Reese. Composer Peter McConnell's music for the new Sly Cooper Thieves in Time is cartoon music, much like what we hear in the old Looney Tunes or like the old Pink Panther films even. Throughout the game, we travel in time to places like Old England, Japan, the Ice Age, and the Old West. Slapstick references and clever scoring give us musical cues about where and when we are. We also have one copy of the game to give away at random. More info at the end of the episode. There are so many references in here, and it just absolutely reminded me of watching Looney Tunes growing up, or Tex Avery, or any of those, traditional style cartoons that have just an amazing set of musicians behind it, for one thing, but are also just making all these really smart references to things to kind of bring us to a certain place or a certain time. Can you speak about any of those specifically?
Sure. I mean, I'm sort of a student of the Looney Tunes stuff. You know that Carl Stalling, the composer, licensed most of the melodies from a guy named Raymond Scott, who's a really interesting musician. You know, not only have I listened to that stuff a lot, but probably more importantly, I really did grow up with it. There's also Henry Mancini's stuff is probably really more prominent as an influence there.
Definitely.
And, he's sort of the emperor of retro chic, spy, tongue-in-cheek sound, of that sound. So I really, certainly was referring to that, and just a lot of experience also playing in bands as a rock and roll musician as well.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Henry Mancini, because that was the other reference I kept kind of being pulled to, was the Pink Panther movies.
The Pink Panther movies, and also the Peter Gunn theme.
Absolutely.
And when I was a kid, we used to go to a place in Connecticut on vacation, still do, and across the lake from us there's a girls' camp, and they had water ballet, and they would play the Pink Panther and Peter Gunn. It would seem like incessantly, and I just thought that was the coolest music, and I would swim to it and, whatever, groove around to it.
The characters in Sly Cooper are quite eccentric, each of themselves. They each have just this vibrant personality. Can you talk about various themes you used, maybe for Murray or Bentley or El Jefe even?
Yeah, El Jefe, for some reason I'm going to him first, just because I was kind of thrown off when I first started looking at the game. Like, why is this guy who's a samurai, chieftain named El Jefe? And, and why does he look an awful lot like Fidel Castro? and I started to get, as the story unfolded for me, and I'm sure this is one of the points that makes the game so charming, is that the whole upside downness of the universe in this game is about people getting put in the wrong place where they don't belong. So El Jefe, I went with the samurai vibe because that it was a samurai world. But, you couldn't help be influenced by the fact that he also looks a little bit like, Che Guevara or something like that.
Yeah.
In terms of the team, Sly and Murray and Bentley, I've done two other projects with two other Sly projects, and really sort of gotten to know these guys. And musically, Sly really is the leader. So his music, his little theme is pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
And Murray and Bentley, they're not dependent on him, but they do kind of orbit around him as characters. So a lot of times their music is related to his theme as well. But in general, it's more of a orchestrational thing. I really think of clarinet for Bentley, and I really think of sort of tuba or bass trombone for Murray, which they're sort of obvious calls. But
they're the right ones.
But they're the right ones. You gotta do. Just gotta, you got if the shoe fits, you gotta go with it.
Yeah.
But they're all sort of part of the same kind of cool jazz suite, you might say.
Now let's talk a little bit about that. You did a score a number of years ago called Grim Fandango, and we talked about it when I spoke with you 2 years ago. And this is, along those lines.
It is. It's. Of course, Grim was another very broad universe. Both of these games have very broad universes where you're sort of allowed to. Well, we're going to go to different places in the world or different places in time in the world. Grim, I think, was a little bit more serious in how the music was employed.
Yes.
And it was, of course, every type of music had some vague connection to Latin music. Grim was also the music of a particular part of San Francisco. It was sort of about the Mission District, because if you went to this part of San Francisco on a Friday night, you could go hear Tom Waits's bass clarinet player in one club and then go around the corner to the taqueria and hear a mariachi band playing. All those characters, all those musicians in that sort of milieu ended up in that score. With Sly, I think musically, it was also an ensemble production in the sense that with Grimm, I kind of developed this ensemble that was about that part of San Francisco. And with Sly, we did these recordings in Nashville, and there's some wonderful musicians there. And we were able to, especially since we broke it into 2-week-long sessions that were several months apart. With the first set of sessions, I really could learn what everybody could do. And with the second set, I was like, okay, well, you got to go to town with this guy because he loves doing X,
Yeah.
And or she loves doing Y. And so it became about the group of musicians that we were fortunate enough to work with.
Did you have a big band and an orchestra then, or did you?
We did. We had a, I guess small big band isn't really a cool term, but we had 3 trombones and something like 5 to 7 winds depending on the session, a couple trumpets. So that's a sort of a small sized big band, and then we also had double reeds and a French horn and 30 strings.
Wow.
And of course, drums and bass and a hot guitar player. And,
Yeah.
It was basically everything you would want for this score.
one of the things that I've enjoyed hearing is bass clarinet.
Yes. Bass clarinet's actually just kind of one of my favorite instruments. I use it a lot because it has almost the upper range of a regular clarinet.
Right.
If you want to be sort of really harsh with it, which is kind of fun to be harsh with it.
Mm-hmm.
But then it has just this wonderful, resonant sound. And when you're doing in a normal sort of live kind of jazz scene, it kind of fell out of favor, as I understand it, kind of early on because it doesn't project the way, say, a Barry sax does.
Right.
You can hear some bass clarinet in really early Ellington recordings. Anyway, when you have a nice room to work with and great miking conditions, then you can put a bass clarinet next to a Barry sax and they sound awesome.
So at some point, I guess I'll end up in Old England. And I enjoyed the references there to like the English and Scottish folk music kind of feel. Mm-hmm. Loved it.
I honestly don't know where that comes from, except that my name's McConnell. Again, when I was younger, we had a few vinyl records, and one of them was Julie Andrews singing Scottish folk tunes. So that probably...
of all things.
Yeah. Somehow or other, it's in me blood somewhere. But and probably a little bit of the old Harvard-y early music stuff, too, because certainly in college, we listened to a lot of, I took early music, and that English sound is quite distinctive. You did say you were you got to the caveman part.
I had just started the caveman part.
That was a kind of a special. I did want to say a word about that. That was kind of a special section because, unlike the other things where there's like an obvious call in terms of Paris, Pink Panther, and Arabia. Well, we have these, we have so many Yosemite Sam references there. We have a lot of literature to draw from. Mm-hmm. When it got to the Ice Age, I was kind of like, wow, okay, that's kind of a blank. I mean, what in the world do you do in the Ice Age? I mean, what did music sound like? And so I really kind of had a few fits and starts there. And then kind of in collaboration with Jonathan Mayer, we came up with this idea that it should sound like music being invented. And that was so liberating because then I could just throw all the rules out the window. Yes. And for a lot of these pieces, I actually said, the pitches are just suggestions. Just make sure you play it in rhythm. Sometimes it's hard to listen to your own music, but I think in this case, it's sort of extra fun to listen to it, just because I was so pleased with how it came out and the group of people we had to work with. I do kind of think of this as my magnum opus. I think music should have a sense of humor, and I take that really, really seriously, if that makes any sense. Yes. And it's so rare that you get a chance to do something that you really, 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 want to do.
Yeah.
And it was just a real joy to work with the Sony guys, Jonathan Mayer and Michael Bricker, and Clint Bajakian and Chuck Dowd, who runs the whole operation there, is just a fantastic leader. And so I really felt super well supported.
Peter, thank you so much for talking with me again. It's just been a pleasure to hear this music. I cannot wait to share this with everyone. And this is really, really well done.
Well, Emily, thanks very much for having me. It's a real privilege.
You've been listening to Top Score from Classical Minnesota Public Radio. I'm Emily Reese, and I had help this week from Johnny Vince Evans. Upcoming shows are going to feature Kevin Ripple of Gears of War and Aliens, Colonial Marines, also Jim Dooley of Infamous and Infamous 2. And I'm heading to PAX East to Boston to moderate a composer panel on Saturday, March 23rd. Swing by. You can see composers Jason Graves, Jack Wall, Greg Edmondson, Gary Scheiman, Kevin Ripple, and Enon Zur. We also have one copy of Sly Cooper, Thieves in Time for the PlayStation 3. It is a Sony franchise. We have that to give away, and we'll draw one winner at random. Find all the rules and information at classicalmpr.org/topscore. Don't forget, too, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr at Top Score Podcast.